If you grew up being called the difficult one, the dramatic one, or the problem child, I want to tell you something that might genuinely change how you see your entire childhood. You were very likely never the problem at all. You were the symptom of one assigned to you by people who needed somewhere else to put it. There's a specific, well-documented psychological dynamic behind this, and it's not about one manipulative person. It's about an entire family, often without anyone consciously deciding to do it, quietly agreeing on who gets to carry the blame. In this video, I'm breaking down family systems theory and a concept called the identified patient, the actual clinical framework behind what most people just call being the black sheep of the family. By the end, you'll understand exactly how this role gets assigned, why it's almost never about anything you actually did, and what it takes to finally put the role down. This concept comes from family systems theory, developed significantly by therapist Salvador Minichin and others working in structural family therapy. It's a well-established clinical framework, not internet pop psychology, even though most people have only ever heard the informal version, black sheep or scapegoat. Stick around for the third part. There's a specific reason research points to the most emotionally aware, most perceptive child in a family as the one most likely to end up in this role. Not the most difficult child, the most aware one. That detail surprises almost everyone who hears it for the first time. Here's the central reframe for this entire video. This isn't a story about one bad actor. Every single mechanism I'm about to walk through works at the level of the whole family system, not any one person's individual cruelty. That's what makes it so hard to see from inside it. There's rarely a single villain to point to, which is exactly why so many people who live this spend years believing the problem must have been them. Let's start with the actual mechanism, what family systems theory calls the identified patient. Family systems theory looks at a family not as a collection of separate individuals, but as a single interconnected system where every member's behavior is shaped by and shapes everyone else's. Inside that framework sits a specific, well-documented pattern. When a family system is under stress, a struggling marriage, a hidden addiction, unprocessed grief, financial pressure, the anxiety generated by that stress has to go somewhere. Rather than the actual source getting addressed directly, families under this kind of pressure will frequently, unconsciously funnel that anxiety onto a single member who becomes what's clinically termed the identified patient, the person everyone points to as the problem, even though the real dysfunction belongs to the system as a whole. Here's what makes this so difficult to recognize from inside it. It very rarely feels like a decision anyone made. No family meeting decides you're the problem now. It happens gradually through 1,000 small moments, whose feelings get taken seriously and whose get dismissed, whose mistakes get remembered for years, and whose get quietly forgotten, who gets called sensitive for reacting to the exact same thing someone else reacted to without consequence. Consider a family where the parents' marriage is quietly falling apart, but never openly discussed. One child begins acting out, struggling in school, seeming anxious, pulling away. The family's attention immediately, almost gratefully, redirects toward fixing that child. The parents unite around a shared project, solving what's wrong with their kid. Nobody in the family consciously registers what's actually happening, that focusing on the child is functioning as a way to avoid looking directly at the marriage. The child's struggle becomes the family's shared distraction, and the actual, unaddressed source of tension quietly continues underneath it, unexamined. Not every family designates a scapegoat, and the ones that do rarely do it consciously. Research on this pattern points to a specific, somewhat counterintuitive dynamic in how the role tends to get assigned. It's disproportionately given not to the most disruptive child, but to the child who is most emotionally attuned, the one most likely to notice and sometimes name out loud what everyone else in the family has silently agreed not to look at. This happens because a family under unaddressed strain depends on a kind of unspoken agreement to maintain the appearance of normalcy. A child who is highly perceptive, who picks up on tension, who asks the question nobody wants asked, or who simply reacts honestly to something dysfunctional, becomes, from a system's perspective, a threat to that fragile equilibrium. Reframing that child as the problem is, in a strange way, more comfortable for the system than confronting what the child is actually responding to. Picture a household with an undiscussed drinking problem. One child in the family becomes the designated truth teller, the one who brings it up, who reacts visibly to the tension everyone else has learned to quietly absorb. That child is frequently the one who ends up labeled as difficult, dramatic, or the problem, while the actual issue, the drinking, remains the unspoken, protected secret. The child isn't being punished for causing a problem. They're being punished for noticing one and refusing to pretend they hadn't. If, looking back, you were the family member most likely to ask the uncomfortable question, most likely to react honestly instead of going along with an unspoken silence, and you were also the one most consistently labeled as the difficult one, that combination is a strong indicator of exactly this dynamic, rather than any actual character flaw on your part. So far, the identified patient carries anxiety that actually belongs to the whole system, and the role is disproportionately assigned to the most perceptive member, not the most disruptive one. Part 3 covers what this does to a person long after they've left the household that assigned it to them. Here's the part that surprises most people. The identified patient role doesn't end when you move out. Research on this pattern is fairly consistent. People who carried this role as children frequently find themselves repeating a strikingly similar dynamic in adult friendships, romantic relationships, and even workplaces, not because they're seeking it out, but because the pattern has become neurologically and emotionally familiar. The nervous system, in a very real sense, gravitates toward what it already knows how to navigate, even when what it knows is painful. There's also a deeper, quieter cost that compounds over years. Children who grow up in this role frequently internalize the label directly. Not just "my family treats me this way," but "there must genuinely be something wrong with me for them to treat me this way." An explanation that, however painful, at least makes the situation feel explainable and, in a strange way, within their control. Believing you're flawed is, for a child especially, often easier to hold than the alternative, that the adults responsible for you were the ones distributing blame they couldn't face themselves. Adult survivors of this dynamic frequently describe a specific, recurring experience: entering a new relationship or workplace and unconsciously waiting to be blamed, over-explaining themselves preemptively, or feeling a familiar, low-grade anxiety in group settings that has no clear present-day cause. What's actually happening is a well-worn emotional pathway activating in a completely new context. The role has traveled with them, even though the original family system that assigned it is no longer physically present. One of the clearest adult markers of this pattern, a persistent, hard-to-shake belief that conflict, when it happens, must somehow be your fault by default. Even in situations where, examined honestly, there's no real evidence supporting that assumption. If any part of that sounded familiar, I want to be direct about something. That belief was installed. It was not something you arrived at through evidence. It's worth treating it with exactly that level of skepticism going forward. Family systems research points to something that makes this dynamic even harder to see clearly from inside it. The identified patient role frequently exists alongside its mirror opposite, a golden child, a sibling or family member who is idealized, praised, and protected from scrutiny. These two roles function together as two ends of the same system's stabilizing mechanism. One person absorbs the blame, the other absorbs the family's need to believe everything is fine. This matters because it means the dynamic is rarely visible as unfair from inside the family while it's happening. It's actively obscured by comparison. If one sibling can do very little wrong and another can do very little right, the family has a built-in, ready-made explanation available at all times. Well, they're just different. That framing prevents anyone in the system from asking the much harder underlying question: different according to what standard, and who's setting it? In many documented cases, the golden child and the scapegoat are treated, quite literally, for the exact same behavior, in opposite ways. One sibling's mistake is quickly forgiven and minimized. The other's identical mistake becomes evidence supporting a story the family has already decided about them. The inconsistency is rarely acknowledged directly. It simply becomes how things are absorbed by both siblings as just the shape of their family, rather than recognized as the deliberate, if unconscious, imbalance it actually is. Here's what actually helps, according to therapists who specialize in this specific dynamic. And it starts with something that sounds almost too simple: naming the role explicitly out loud or in writing as a role, not an identity. "I was assigned this position in a system under stress" is a fundamentally different, more accurate statement than "I am the difficult one." And the shift in language alone tends to create real distance from a label that's often been carried unexamined for decades. The second, harder practice is learning to separate the automatic guilt response from actual evidence. When conflict arises now, in adult life, the old pattern will often still fire first, an immediate assumption that you're at fault before any facts have even been considered. The practice isn't to suppress that reflex. It's to treat it explicitly as information about the past, not a reliable signal about the present, and to consciously ask what a neutral outside observer would actually conclude, rather than trusting the automatic assumption. The third practice, and often the most difficult, recognizing that healing this doesn't require the rest of your family to ever acknowledge what happened. Family systems, by their nature, resist change, and many adult survivors spend years hoping for a validation that the system, structurally, is often unable to give, because acknowledging it would require confronting exactly what the system was built to avoid in the first place. Healing that depends on that acknowledgement ever arriving can wait indefinitely. Healing that starts with your own accurate account of what happened does not have to. Therapists working with adult scapegoat role survivors frequently describe a specific turning point: the moment a client stops asking, "What's wrong with me that they treated me this way?" and starts asking, "What was happening in the system that made this role necessary for someone to carry?" That single reframe, from individual defect to systemic function, is, in a large number of documented cases, where real movement actually begins. Here's what ties this entire video together. Every mechanism we've covered exists to protect a family system's sense of normalcy at the direct expense of one member's sense of self. The identified patient absorbs anxiety that was never theirs to carry. The golden child dynamic obscures the unfairness through comparison. And the belief that gets internalized that something is inherently wrong with you is, in the vast majority of documented cases, not a conclusion drawn from evidence. It's a role that was assigned, absorbed, and never actually examined. If any part of this described your own family, I want to be careful to say this clearly. Recognizing the pattern doesn't mean every family member acted with malice, and it doesn't require you to see your entire childhood as a conspiracy. Family systems can produce this dynamic without anyone involved fully understanding what they were doing, which doesn't make the impact any less real. But it does mean the goal here is clarity, not condemnation. If you recognize yourself in this, the difficult one, the sensitive one, the one who somehow always ended up carrying the blame, I'd genuinely like to hear about it in the comments. This pattern is far more common, and far less about you personally than most people who've lived it ever get told. The role you were assigned as a child was never a reflection of who you actually were. It was a job the system needed someone to do. You're allowed to finally put it down. Subscribe for more breakdowns like this one, and I'll see you in the next video.